I bring you greetings from Purdue A&M University, where I am the director for the Texas Institute for the Preservation of History and Culture. And my work there is primarily writing and researching about Black history, specifically Black history in Texas. And at the Institute, at the TIPHC, one of the things that we like to say a lot is, know your history, know yourself. I'm aware of the history of the events here in Braunfels and some of the MLK Day events that have happened before. And as I look out on the faces here and just the diversity, just personifying the human dignity from Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. You know, people of different colors, backgrounds, peacefully gathered to honor the spirit of a transcendent man, a transcendent man who campaigned for this kind of togetherness. Now this comes despite the troubling events of the last year or so that have seen an emboldened backward shift in social attitudes to an era when it was okay to openly hate, discriminate, and oppress people of color, to be xenophobic and tolerate racial injustice, all of which through the years fostered the civil rights movement and the leadership of people like Dr. King on a national level, but also on the local level here in Texas. People like Marshall's James Farmer, who founded the Congress of Racial Equality and organized the Freedom Riders, which led to the desegregation of interstate travel. Corpus Christi Dr. Hector P. Garcia and the American GI Forum, working for the rights of Mexican Americans. Reverend Claude Black in San Antonio, A. Maceo Smith in Dallas. L. Drewy Stearns, who led the movement to integrate Houston's downtown businesses, and the frontline members of organizations like the NAACP, LULAC, and so many others. I'm sure Dr. King would applaud this kind of setting today in Texas, given his last appearances in the state in 1967 were rife with fear and threats from local authorities and a bigoted populace that wanted desperately to thwart his message and maintain a racist status quo. I was a high school senior in that year, and I remember his visit to Houston, as well as the other times that he came to the city, and the excitement that permeated 3rd Ward, 5th Ward, Sunnyside, my neighborhood, and Houston areas of the Black community. We were so excited that Dr. King was coming to visit us and spread his message. Yet, at that time, there was something missing for me about it all, about his work, about the depths of the civil rights movement. And I see that on a lot of youngsters' faces. I was in that same position at that age, 17, 18 years old, and watching all of this unfold. Beyond the goal of integration, I didn't get it. I didn't give much thought to its deeper meaning because I had no sense of Black history. I had no in-depth knowledge of why the results of his work would be so much more profound than just the ability to, among other things, eat at any restaurant that I wanted and to enter those restaurants through the front door. The disconnect was that in my high school history classes, the curriculums only allowed us to be taught that there was slavery, there was emancipation, and here we are.
Amen. Amen.
There was no before, and there was no after. You know, there was no context to any of that discussion. Yet, much of the movement was about gaining a mainstream knowledge and acceptance of who we are as African Americans and the importance of our roles in building this country. But that acknowledgement first had to be taught and embraced in the Black community. I was not alone in my naivety about Black history. Back then, too many of us had no idea about the power of that history, of Black history, because its study and pedagogy was severely muted. And that stunted the ability of Black adolescents like myself to grasp the weight of the movement. Dr. King's efforts and the Black heroes who had come well before him with their shows of perseverance, bravery, and activism that established their places in history. Their examples of overcoming the odds and their determined spirits gave hope to generations of black people around the world. Learning their stories helped me to know myself and to fearlessly strive to achieve my goals as a writer and now as a historian. And it explains why I continue through my work to hear so many people remind me of the lingering importance of telling those stories, generation to generation, across ethnic and across racial lines. That's why the theme for this year's event resonated so much with me, with a slight twist. Quoting Dr. King, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. There was this great silence about black history back then. But that silence brought a curiosity to me. And that gave me voice and began my life as a historian with a new level of understanding, excitement, and the realization of how much history matters. I call it my age of enlightenment. I did not get a lot of black history back then. I can't get enough of it now. I've been talking and writing about black history for the past 3 decades or so, and the Texas past has presented a colorful palette of inspiration. Texas was the first area of this country that saw a black African, almost 500 years ago. Texas was the last state to free its African-American slaves 153 years ago. And then we see a white Texan, LBJ, signed the Civil Rights Act in 1964, and another white Texan, George W. Bush, who was instrumental in the building of a structure in Washington, D.C. to house the stories and artifacts that trace the experiences of black Americans in this country. Because history matters.
Yes, sir.
I'm sure of that because I hear it so much from my readers, from people in the community, black and white, and otherwise, who quite often thank me for sharing the stories that I write about. The black history-related exhibits that I present at Prairie View A&M University through our university's Cultural Center. History matters for young generations of black Americans who need to know about the people who came before them, the people who set the tables for social change by heroically daring to challenge societal norms to pursue their dreams, despite the odds. History matters because of Estevanico, the Moor servant who on a chilly winter morning in 1528 staggered ashore from a shipwreck in the Gulf of Mexico and onto the sandy beaches of Galveston Island, along with several Spanish conquistadors. For that, Texas had its first African-American presence and the first black explorer of the southwestern American territory. History matters because of the Africans who first came to this part of the world in the 16th century as slaves in Mexico, working in the gold and silver mines and doing other labors. At one point, there were so many Africans who had been brought to the area by Spaniards that New Spain, as Mexico was called then, had 3 times as many African inhabitants as Spanish inhabitants. Those populations grew. Black slaves escaped. They intermarried with indigenous people and established Afro-Mestizo colonies and cultures. And some of those families migrated north to the Rio Grande area and likely into what would become Texas. Several Afro-Mexican communities still exist, and conservative estimates are that more than 50% of Mexicans can trace their family histories to Africans. Think about that. And we say brothers.
Yeah. All right. There you go.
History matters because of Sam McCullough, a free black soldier who in 1835 at Goliad was wounded and became the first casualty of the Texas Revolution, only to have to petition the state legislature for his right to remain in Texas after independence from Mexico was won. After that happened, Texas wanted all free blacks exiled from this state. To stay in this state, if you were a free black person at that time, you had to petition, and not a lot of those petitions were approved. We had to fight to stay in the state. History matters because a man like Felix Haywood, who was among the slaves who on June 19th, 1865, ventured for the first time into the unknown territory of freedom. Haywood would recall later, "We knew freedom was upon us, but we didn't know what was to come with it. We thought we were going to get rich like the white folks. We thought we were going to be richer than the white folks because we were stronger and knew how to work, and the whites didn't. And we didn't have to work for them anymore. We soon found out that freedom could make folks proud, but it didn't make them rich." History matters because of men like George Ruby, Matt Gaines, Walter Burton, and others who were among the first black legislators. History matters because of black military heroes like Dory Miller, a Waco native who at Pearl Harbor not only pulled several men to safety during the Pearl Harbor attack, but manned an anti-aircraft gun for which he had no training, because the Navy did not allow black sailors in combat roles. Mr. Miller was a mess man. He was a cook. He left his station below to get aboard with this attack on the way, to help, to serve. He helped to fight back against the Japanese attack. And here I must acknowledge, in terms of military heroes, New Braunfels' own General Julius Parker, who organized, established, and served as the first chief of the Army's Military Intelligence Corps, and became the highest ranking African-American military intelligence officer in the history of the Army. New Braunfels' own. History matters because of the determination of Heman Sweat, the Houston postman, whose desire to study law at the University of Texas was granted by the U.S. Supreme Court, making him, in 1950, the first African-American student admitted to the university, and opening the door for a successful challenge nationwide against school segregation in the Supreme Court's Brown v. Board decision, opening up the doors to integrate every school in this country. Know your history. Know yourself. And certainly, history matters because of our purpose here today, the memory of Dr. King, and a glimpse of his dream come true. As we gather here and others gather across the nation, allowing freedom and respect to ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state, every city, on this day when all of God's children, black and white, men and women, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, meet in a show of peace and brotherhood. We may not be at the mountaintop, but with each occasion like this, its summit is becoming more and more in focus. Black history, U.S. history, the memory of the work of Dr. King reminds us we will continue to march ahead. We will continue this progress. Thank you.
Amen.
Know your history.